All right. Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Karl Soule, and for the next 90 minutes or so, we are going to be talking about different best practices for film and television workflows using Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, what I'm going to really focus on here is some of the practices that I have learned as being a part of the film and television team based in Los Angeles, California. These are some different things that'll set things up for success in a Premiere Pro project. There are many, many options when you're working inside of Premiere Pro, and the challenge can sometimes be if you're in an environment where you need to work effectively with other teams. What I mean by that is editors may be doing the editorial work, but you may have a different team of people working on color or different people that need to handle audio. And you need to be able to effectively take an edit from Premiere Pro and hand it over to the coloring team or the finishing team, the audio team, to get an audio turnover. Being able to work in this environment is a little bit different than just using Creative Cloud to do everything. And so what this session is really going to be about is working in that type of environment, making sure that metadata stays consistent from beginning to end so that nothing gets lost. You can relink to high resolution media at the end of a workflow, even if you're editing something that was generated for dailies purposes. Now I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. There are a couple of options I'd just like to talk to really quickly here. We do have a Q&A pod that's available to you, so please feel free. I want to make sure that this is something that is interactive. You guys can ask questions to the Q&A pod. I'd love to get your feedback. If there's anything here that I'm missing, because there are differences in certain workflows worldwide. A lot of what I'm going to be focused on is sort of the best practices that I know from North America, but I'm also incorporating my experience living over in Singapore for 5 years, as well as working with different editors around the world in different places like Germany and the UK. So there are definitely differences in how things are done in different locations, but there's some common challenges that I see people running into. And so what I want to make sure is get you guys on the right path so that things are, you don't run into any challenges down the road. I'll tell you one of the worst things our team sometimes has to deal with is somebody who doesn't have a professional background, has been using Premiere for things like maybe YouTube videos, and they suddenly get a big break. They make a feature film, an independent movie, and suddenly they're given a budget to redo the sound and redo the color. And the challenge can sometimes be, if the files were not put together correctly to begin with, it can be very challenging to output and do things like a turnover to an audio team or do a turnover to a color team in another application. So part of what today is making sure that you're using these practices to do the right thing. All right, with that, I am going to go ahead and jump in and just kind of get started. I'm going to be using, I'm not a big fan of slides, but I am going to be using Premiere as a sort of a PowerPoint for you guys to just talk about a few things. This is sort of the agenda that I have for talking today. And keep in mind, this is the first of a series. We could definitely revisit these and make sure and fill out the poll questions at the end of this. We'd love to get your feedback on anything we missed. Any more workshops in the future, things that you would like to see. I'm going to start with just some basics about setting up workstations for success. So this really gets into just some simple things about making sure the systems are set up in a way that works well, particularly if you're working in a collaborative environment. I'll talk a bit about some different preferences and just some pre-production considerations that you want to think about when you're starting a new job. And we'll kind of show some examples of that. Then we're going to get into a feature that was introduced in 2020 for Adobe Premiere. And this is something that is really, really useful for long form and for episodic television. It's a feature called Premiere Pro Productions. And I'm going to be demonstrating this, and my colleague Marjorie is going to be on the call as well, and the two of us are going to do some collaboration, and we're actually going to be using some additional technology to do this remotely. Marjorie is actually based on the East Coast of America, and I'm on the West Coast of America, and we'll show you a little bit of that. We're also going to get into some things that can cause challenges if they're not set up properly, things like speed changes, making sure your audio channelization is set up the way your editors like to work. We'll talk a little bit about things like pancake editing. We'll talk a little bit about audio turnovers. And then I also want to talk a little bit about some specialty deliverables that we sometimes see when it's necessary to set up a project or to do an output in a QuickTime format, for example, where you have split audio. So we'll be covering some of that as well. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about some basic setup stuff, and just talk a little bit about some of the things that we typically hear from customers. And the first thing, obviously, is just understanding how to balance a system for running Premiere Pro effectively. The biggest challenge, the thing that I like to see is making sure that the system is set up with an amount of RAM equal to the number of cores. And what I mean by that is typically when you spec out a computer, when you're looking at a computer system, the processors today are all multi-core processors. You may have anywhere from 4 cores, 8 cores. The very expensive computers can have, 24 cores, 32 cores. A lot of people think it's best to just buy the most expensive processor that's out there, and that's not necessarily the case. Want to make sure that when you're speccing out your workstation systems, look for the amount of cores and the amount of RAM. You want to make sure those two are balanced. Premiere, typically it is multi-threaded, but it typically between 8 to 16 cores is roughly kind of a sweet spot between price and performance that you get. You want to make sure and focus on something in that realm. 8 cores is pretty good if you're doing high definition work. If you're working with just editing codecs like DNX or ProRes, that's perfectly fine. If you're going to be doing things natively using formats like Red, where you're getting into 4K or 6K, a few more cores can actually help with that. And particularly if you're mixing formats, if you're working on documentaries where you have any type of footage might be coming in at any time, it's usually a good idea to add a few more cores because that adds additional decoding capability when you're mixing and matching additional codecs. Look to get about 2 gigs of RAM per core. That's kind of a good rule of thumb. It's a good baseline when you're speccing out a system. So if I had an 8 core processor using something like 16 gigs of RAM, more is not bad. RAM is pretty cheap. If you want to double that, you want to get 32 gigs of RAM. Long form work will use more RAM in the system. So the more RAM you want to put in the system, the better. Windows and Mac, the biggest thing to note with Windows, Windows 10 is the version that is supported these days, and you want to be on Rev 1809 or later. For the Mac, we usually talk about the idea of 2 versions back of the operating system. If I was speccing out a system today, if there was something I was planning on doing a Premiere Pro project, I would probably want to be on Mojave at the absolute earliest version of the operating system. Mojave has some performance benefits using a subsystem called Apple Metal that we really recommend using that or moving to something newer. I am actually running Big Sur. I'm running the latest Mac OS on my older MacBook Pro tonight. So we'll see how this works. I just actually upgraded this weekend, but we do have a lot of customers that are already looking at moving to Big Sur moving forward. Mojave is perfectly fine. Catalina is perfectly fine for now. But just know that moving forward in the future, if this is a long-term project and you want to stay on the latest version of Premiere, you should think about the fact that we're going to continue to support 2 versions back. So if you're on Mojave, that means if there's a new version of Premiere that comes out soon, Mojave may not be supported. That's the biggest thing to think about there. Oh, and before I forget, we get a lot of questions these days about the new Apple Silicon Macs, the new M1 chip that Apple is using in these new MacBook Airs, Mac Minis. We do have a beta version of Premiere that's currently running on the Apple Silicon Macs. You can also run the shipping versions of the software, but they will run under the Rosetta 2 setup. So right now, for professional level use, the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air, it's okay. I think this is definitely the first generation of Apple Silicon, so we'll see how this evolves moving forward. Okay. The next thing I really quickly want to talk about is the idea of dealing with your profile and getting moved into a system. One challenge that I typically see with Premiere Pro editors is they'll work on a computer system for a long time, many, many years. They will become moved into that system. They will have keyboard shortcuts. They will have all different types of preferences within Premiere Pro. There are ways of specifying what we call track height presets, where we can specify different track heights and actually save those as a separate preset. And there's a lot of different places in Premiere where this can happen. This is one of those things that we do have a cloud service that can handle this. It is possible to go up to the Premiere Pro menu and use this sync settings function, and this will actually synchronize your settings with the cloud. I am hearing a little bit of background noise right now. I'm not sure if that's somebody off mute. Just as a question to the other presenters there. Thank you if you've muted. Thank you very much. Okay. What was I saying? There we go. If you don't want to rely on cloud syncing, I know a lot of production facilities in Hollywood, in North America, prefer to make sure that they have everything backed up locally, just in case of emergencies. So I always like to point this out. If you're looking for all of those preferences, if you want to make sure that you have a local copy on shared storage someplace, there is a folder that is found in your documents folder. This profile folder that you see right here, this contains virtually every one of your presets. And there's nothing wrong with making a copy of it, putting it on a thumb drive, keeping it with you on a keychain. By doing this, you're ensuring that you will have all the things necessary to edit the way you want to edit. You will have sequence presets. You will have track height presets, the way the bin layout presets are saved. You will have your, all of these different things that you probably created and used at various times in Premiere. You can keep those with you. And so if you walk into a facility and say, I'm a Premiere Pro editor, and they give you a brand new copy of Premiere, this will get you started very, very quickly. You'll be able to edit at speed on a different computer without having to spend a lot of time setting things up. The one thing that you cannot use from system to system is only, these are all Windows and Mac compatible, except keyboard shortcuts. If you do move between Windows and Mac systems, there is actually a folder inside of that profile folder. Or if you are on a Mac, it is called Mac. And if you're on Windows, it's called Windows. This is where your keyboard shortcut layout is going to be found. And unfortunately, just because of some fundamental differences between the way the control key, the command key on a Mac work, a lot of the keyboard shortcuts are just slightly different. Control is used for things like copy and paste on Windows. It didn't make sense to have one file that would map across them. We've tried to find something that people approved of, and the Mac editors, even when they moved to Windows, still use Control-C and Control-V for copy-paste. So how do we translate that into a new file? just easier to have two separate ones. But just know if you have the keyboard shortcut in there from a Mac and you use that profile on Windows, perfectly fine, works great. Okay, a couple of other quick notes here. Some things to always think about when you're starting up a new project. We'll go over these very, very quickly. The first thing to think about is what resolution do you actually want to edit at? You may think, oh, I've got a great computer. I'm going to work natively with my red 6K files, and we'll just take the files right off the camera card and start editing them. That can be fine for short form work on one computer connected to fast storage. What about multiple editors working with these files? What about distance remote collaboration workflows? Many, many times it's necessary to use a smaller file size than what the cameras are shooting in. And part of that, we're going to go over this, is something I call an online-offline workflow, which is where you actually have somebody creating dailies, where they're actually kind of prepping the media. They're adding metadata to the media. They might be baking in some color information so that the clips are not that flat look that we typically shoot with today. So the interesting thing here is a lot of people always think, oh, we'll just make everything 1920 by 1080. That's not always necessary, and it's not always the best workflow, and I'll show you why really quick here. So if I am working in a sequence, if my media is a different raster, I might make my media as a fraction of what the camera actually shoots in. What this means is, if my media is 6K by 3K, maybe instead of making it 1920 by 1080 and putting black bars and doing other things to it, I might want to make a file that's 3K by 1K. It's going to be an odd aspect ratio. It's going to be a long, stretched out aspect ratio. But the benefit is this lets me actually play around in Premiere with camera framing. And this is a very common workflow that we see today. This example that I have here, the final deliverable of the movie that we're working on here is actually going to be more like a 2:3:9 aspect ratio. It's kind of this anamorphic looking scope. It's not anamorphic, it's spherical, but it's spherical scope aspect ratio here. The original camera footage, you'll notice, has more room at the bottom and the top of the frame that I'm not seeing inside of my timeline. In this case, the timeline that we're cutting in is actually a different aspect ratio. It's possible in Premiere, I'll try zooming in here. I don't know if you can see the zoom in, but right here where it says frame size, you can see that I've created a custom sequence that is 1920 by 858. And so this always shows me the correct framing. I don't have to put a matte, I don't have to put black bars top and bottom. I can actually cut in the aspect ratio that I want to work in. Now, part of the benefit of doing something like this is this means that anytime I'm working on a clip, when I hit match frame, I'm seeing the entire frame of the shot here in my source monitor, and I have the ability to go into a clip, and in this case, I can actually use the position control to move this up or down in the frame, and you can see it automatically exposes the additional pixels are just kind of, they're off frame. So this is something to think about when you're setting up a film. Interesting fact, on the movie Terminator Dark Fate, which was cut in Premiere, we actually saw up to 7 different camera aspect ratios being used. Everything from 5K, 6K, The Hero camera was an 8K camera with anamorphic lenses that was shooting at something like a 2.7 to 1 aspect ratio. And then in addition to that, there were GoPro cameras, there were other types of sport and secondary cameras that were being used during the making of the movie. So what size files do you actually want to edit with? Instead of thinking about working with just make everything 1920 by 1080, sometimes it's a good idea to sort of think through what would be a good resolution for the footage coming out of the camera. These are the types of things that we think about. So this is what I mean by file raster versus sequence raster, and trying to kind of think through what exactly you want to do when you're working. It's not uncommon to see folks editing in timelines that are 2.5K. If you're shooting 5K, that's half res. That might be the resolution you want to shoot at. But the exact dimensions can vary depending on what your deliverable is. We live in an interesting world where it's no longer just a 4:3 screen or a 16:9 screen. You can pick whatever you like. And Premiere is flexible and durable enough to handle that. So just something to think about. Proxy or offline? Now this gets into a big question about how you want to handle your media. There are a lot of people that try using our proxy-based workflows that are built into Premiere. And what I mean by proxies are when the media can actually be connected to 2 clips simultaneously. So what this means, I'll just open up another project here. If I look at this in a list view, there are options within Premiere to actually create these proxy files. So the way this is designed to work is this is designed to work by starting with the original camera footage, the high-res camera footage that's 5K or 6K, and then adding the proxies as you need to while you're editing. This isn't a great workflow. Just being honest, it's not a great workflow for things where you're doing turnovers, where you're handing off at the end to somebody doing the final sound or this final picture. It's great if you're working just within Creative Cloud and within the tools inside of Creative Cloud. But some of the challenges with this, everybody needs to pretty much stay connected to both the high-res and the proxy media. It is possible to offline the high-res and just focus on the proxy media, but it can get confusing rather rapidly. What I see a lot of people using is, again, if you already have a process where dailies are being created, where there's somebody on set that's taking the camera cards, they're making safety copies of the footage. Never just make 1 copy, always make 2 copies. If they're making the editing media, if they're adding some kind of color information, and they can do this with any tool from Adobe Media Encoder to a lot of specialty tools out there from different companies that handle dailies. The digital imaging technician, or DIT, is usually the person responsible for this, either on set or somewhere close to the set, to take those memory cards, make a pristine copy first. No changes, just make the copy of the media. And then at the same time, start to add things like LUTs or color values so that the footage, it has that information kind of baked into it. That is the workflow I'm going to be focused on in the next 90 minutes or so. I want to make sure that you guys are aware that Premiere can definitely work in that traditional offline environment where editorial never sees the high-res, never needs to look at the high-res media at all. They can just focus on editing some footage that's given to them by a digital imaging technician. I want to make sure that that is rock solid. Something else that I also recommend with workflows, if it's your first time working with different vendors, test the dailies. If somebody is going to be on the shooting team, have them shoot just some background shots and background plates or things, give you those files as they've been processed, and test them out in Premiere. Make sure that the metadata information comes in correctly, make sure everything works properly. Same thing at the end, was you're getting close to needing to hand off a file to the audio team that's going to be doing the final mixing of the audio. Test your turnover workflow. Take a scene or a shot, export it out in the format that the audio team wants. Ask them if there's any changes need to be made to it. Same thing with color. Test your color pipeline. It's crucial to success to test that ahead of time so that it doesn't create delays down the road. All right. With that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about deliverables when we get to the end here. But the next thing that I want to kind of jump in and talk to you guys about is how to set up a project for success. And this is using something called Adobe Productions. And to show you this, I'm going to start, let me open up another project here. And I'm actually in a production right now. We'll kind of talk through this in just a minute. We're going to get into the meat of things right now, because this is a key and important thing to note when you're setting up to work inside of Premiere. If you're doing anything long form, if you're doing episodic TV where you reuse shots from earlier episodes in current episodes, if you want to stay organized, and also there's a big benefit with performance using productions, which I'll talk about here. What a production is, instead of working in a single Premiere Pro project, many people, that's what they know. That was the way to use Premiere for 20 years. You open Premiere, you create a project. Once you create the project, you start to add clips. You start to make sequences and you put those clips on the sequences. The challenge with a single project is as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, when we start talking about the number of clips in a feature film or in multiple seasons of an episodic TV show, a single project file can become a little bit unwieldy. It can get a bit large. It takes a long time to save. It can also just take a long time to open the project. A lot of people break down a single project and they can actually make multiple projects. And the nice thing about this is it also means you can start to collaborate. Since only one person can have a project open at a time, you can create multiple projects and different editors can edit in different projects. The challenge with that's something that we introduced about 4 or 5 years ago. But the challenge with that is, again, every project has to be self-contained. If I have a sequence, the bin in that project has to contain all those clips. If I copy a sequence over from my project to my assistant's project, all the clips come with that sequence. So this creates a big problem with duplicate clips. To address this, we've created this new idea, this thing called a production. And a production is a special folder that contains many Premiere Pro projects, hundreds of Premiere Pro projects if you want. Each of these projects can be smaller, but most importantly, each project references the other projects. Meaning, if I right-click on a clip on a timeline and I say reveal this in the project, Premiere will go through all the other projects that are in the production and find the one that contains that master clip. I can have one set of media living in one project, and I can have the timelines. I can have many timelines that are referencing those clips living in that solo project. So what a production is, it is a folder on disk. It's something that just contains Premiere Pro projects. Do not put your media in this folder. You can put your media in a separate folder side by side, but do not put media in this. Keep it just projects so that Premiere can effectively search through all the different folders and subfolders. All the users looking at a production see the same thing. They all stay in sync. You open the projects that you're going to be working in, and you can reuse projects from older productions, and you can bring those into new productions very, very easily. So if you have common elements like stock footage, sound effects, music, graphics. You can actually bring those in and keep those within the same production. The way this kind of breaks down is if you had a single project, you would make a lot of folders and subfolders to organize your project. Organization, always key, right? With a production, you do the same thing, but these elements here represent different Premiere Pro projects. Instead of being simple folders, these are actually different projects that can contain small amounts of the overall production. So the benefits of using this, first off, instead of having a project, a single Premiere project with 100,000 clips in it, I have some documentary editors that, they're working with 5 years worth of footage, many shots, many days of shooting. When they were using a single project, it was taking, 20 or 30 minutes to open the project because Premiere checks every piece of media in that project, says, yep, this is all ready to edit. With a production, it opens very quickly. And it also means that when you're working on a segment, it just has to save what is inside of that segment of the production. This avoids duplicate clips. The only time you make duplicates is if you absolutely need to. And there are some times where you might want to do that. I'll talk about that at the end. And best of all, this is something that allows for easy collaboration. I can be working on part of this production. Marjorie can be working on a different part of this production. And I want to stress that productions aren't just for collaboration. Anybody who's even a solo editor can benefit from using a production if you're using a lot of content, if you're working on a feature film or an episodic show, and particularly when you reuse a lot of the same bits and pieces, things like graphics and music and sound effects. Now, I mentioned this concept. The idea of cross-project referencing is I can actually put the clips and organize the clips into one project or into many different projects based on day of shooting or based on scene number, however it works for me. And whenever I want to create a timeline, I can actually open up a new project and just create my editing timeline and have both projects open at the same time and begin dragging and dropping clips from one project into the other. Directly to the timeline. I don't have to make a copy of clip 1 to put it on this sequence. I'll show you that in just a minute. Again, no duplicates necessary. This works with multicam clips, which we'll talk about. If you're interested in some really nice documentation on how productions work, this is a URL that you can check out. And this will give you a PDF file that has all the good information about how a production can be set up correctly. So I definitely recommend checking that out. All right, now I am going to start just working. And by the way, let me just quickly check the Q&A pod here and just see what we have. So I'm not seeing any questions just yet, but again, I want to stress, if you guys have questions, if you're interested in what I'm talking about, you want to ask some questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A pod. I'll be happy to answer those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump out of this timeline. And I'm actually going to go up and open up a different project here. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about what you're seeing on the screen right now. Now, I have a production. I've actually already created a production here. This is my, you'll note this is called Century Movie Time. And to create a production in Premiere, very, very simple. File, new, production. You can only have one production open at a time. One thing to be aware of. But within that production, you can have many folders and subfolders, and each of these icons that you see here represent a different Premiere Pro project. The icons actually show what the state of each of these projects are. Now, I'm working locally on my machine here, and I have another editor in the other room named Mike Burton that's got a couple of projects open here. Just by looking at the icons, I can see these are available for me to edit. I don't currently have them open. They are closed on my machine. When an icon is filled in, it means that that project is now open on my machine. So if I double click on this sound effects project, it will open on my machine and the icon will fill in. The lock icon or the green pencil icon indicates whether I can make changes to the project. So just because Mike has this project open for sound effects, it didn't mean that I can't open it and use it on my timeline. I still have full access to these sound effects. I still have the ability to take a sound effect, and drag it and drop it down into my edit. Not a problem. Still have full access to it. But since it is locked, it means I cannot delete clips or rename clips. A lot of the functions you'll see here are grayed out. So if I want to gain access to this, I can click this lock, but if Mike has it, I'd have to call Mike and say, oh, Mike, I need to add more sound effects into the library. Can you release that project for me? Now, the way this works with different clips, each of the clips in this timeline are actually in a separate project. So if I go back and show you this project mostly just contains some different timelines. It contains some different cuts that I have in here, but the media, I have one clip in here that I must have put in here during the last time I showed this. The media is living in different projects. The media is actually over in other projects. So what this means is if I want to add clips to this, and I'll just come over to the end of my sequence here. And let's say I'm working with this and I want to add an additional clip at the end here. I have my end credit clip that I want to show here. Let me go ahead and open up day 5 again. So let's say I have this clip from my day 5 project and I want to add it to my timeline. When I drag and drop this in, it doesn't add any media to this project. I'll do this one more time just to really showcase this. So here I am in my production. I'm going to go into the Scratch Projects folder here, and I'm going to open up this project called Karl Scratch. And I'll just delete the clip that I have on the timeline here. This is an empty project except for one timeline. No other clips. I'm going to grab a set of clips and just drop these onto my sequence. It did not make copies. It didn't put any copies in here. These clips on the timeline are referencing the day 5 project. If I right-click on one of these and say reveal in the project, it will highlight the clip in day 5. If the day 5 project is closed and I right-click on another clip and say, you know what, reveal that one in the project, it will open day 5 and highlight the clip for me. So this is fundamental. This is what we call cross-project referencing. It's the reason these projects are secretly linked under the hood. There is a production, every project within that production are linked together in a special way. And that's what makes productions different from just having a collection of Premiere Pro project files. So Sean, good question. Sean is asking a question. Do you have to manually save a project so it updates for collaborators? We're going to show that in just a second. I am actually going to show something with Marjorie in just a second. In fact, almost time for me to do that. There's a couple quick more things that I want to show you with this project that I'm running here locally in California. One of the things you'll notice that I've got this sort of set up with different folders and subfolders. This organizational structure is my own. There's nothing about this that is mandatory or special. You can pick the folder structure that you want to use. And I designed this around the idea of cutting a feature film or cutting a short film. I've got a folder called Media. I've got a folder called Dailies. We shot for 5 days. Each of the dailies went into a folder. From there, we also had some additional pickup shots with some drones. We did a little bit of reshooting. Each of these get a separate project. So each of these is relatively small. Now, we're going to switch over to a different production in just a second, and that one is more geared towards episodic television. But the key thing here is the organization that you apply to a production is entirely yours. You get to pick exactly how to organize this. If I was doing a documentary film, I might do this very differently. I might have different shooting days labeled by the interviews. I might have, different locations set up with different names of locations as different projects. With this, the dailies build together until all the dailies are put together and sunk. They get moved into a scene project. So this is an example of like the beginning scene of the movie here, where this was cut together. Then the scenes get cut together into reels, and then the reels finally get cut into full-length timelines where you can watch the entire movie from a single sequence. Again, entirely up to you what makes the most sense and how you want to organize a production. I'm going to go ahead and close this production, and I'm going to move over to another production. I think in this case, I'm just going to say, nope, don't save my changes. And this next production that I want to show you is, this one is actually, again, this is geared more towards a feature, an episodic TV show. So I'll just quickly twirl up some of these folders here so that you can kind of see the way this one is laid out. So this one at the top level, this is a TV show called Around the World. It's a short form episodic series that we want to work on. I might actually organize this so that all the graphic elements and the sound effects and the music elements all live on the top level here. But I might put the seasons in different folders. So you can see there are 3 seasons of this show. Each season folder has episode folders for 10 episodes. Each episode folder has subfolders for dailies and acts and full episodes and turnover cuts. And within this, each of these are separate Premiere Pro projects. So you can see how a single production can actually have multiple, hundreds of different smaller projects. Not one big project, many small projects. Marjorie, if you're there, I want to show.
I'm here.
Thank you. So this is Marjorie Sachs. Marjorie came to Adobe from working in post-production based here in Los Angeles for quite some time. And Marjorie, you want to describe a little bit of what you do now with Adobe?
Yeah, so I was hired on. I'm a software quality engineer, so I do everything from testing the software before it goes out to the public, finding bugs, to a lot of feature design, and then a lot like what Karl does, help onboarding people who are either converting, from Avid onto Premiere, or have a big project and just kind of figuring out the best workflow. and set them up for success.
So Marjorie's team is actually the ones that developed productions and have been working on this for multiple years now. So it was really, really exciting to see this past year as this went live. It became a publicly available feature. Now, what we're actually using here, Marjorie is based on the East Coast. So she is, thousands of kilometers away from where I'm at right now in Los Angeles. She is sheltering with family back on the East Coast right now. I'm on the West Coast. How we're using Productions, we're actually utilizing, because Productions was really designed to be around the way people used to always tell us they wanted to work. They wanted to have a facility with shared storage, everybody working on the same shared storage. We're actually using a technology called LucidLink to use this. This is a third-party tool that basically what LucidLink does is it mounts on the systems and looks like a local network drive, even though we are actually working over great distances. So if I reveal this project or reveal the production on the Finder level, you'll see that this is actually, put this in a column view here so it's a little easier. You can see that this is mounted to a volume called Adobe. This is the LucidLink mount. This is actually mounted using AWS storage, but LucidLink actually works with a lot of different storage vendors to have inexpensive solutions around the world. They have some special magic though, because what this does is it allows cloud storage to look like local network storage. They utilize all available bandwidth. They use a lot of predictive local caching to allow this to work. And in this case, you can either just have the production folder on LucidLink, or in our case, we put the media up on LucidLink as well. If you're looking for a low-cost solution to use Productions and allow remote workflows, I would look at getting a small amount of LucidLink storage just to keep your production. This production folder that I have here, again, no media inside of this. This is, it's under, is that 1.6 megs? It's very small because it just contains a lot of small Premiere Pro projects. It doesn't require a huge amount of information, a huge amount of data storage. You can usually get a minimal configuration to utilize Productions in this remote collaboration environment. Now, Marjorie, I'll tell you what, could you, just so we can see what this looks like from my end, could you go into the Cape Town Dailies project and just throw a quick string out together for me? And once you finish up on that, go ahead and jump over into Iceland, do a similar string out there, but just grab a few shots. And if you can, I know that the ones in the Iceland folder haven't been graded yet, so if you want to go ahead and throw a LUT on a few of those, we can do that as well.
Well,
so while Marjorie is doing that, I'm going to go ahead and open up. Actually, I've already got this open. I've got a project here called 101 Intro. And from here, I can start to work with some of the different files with this. We need to do kind of a fast cut intro specific to this episode using some of the footage from Cape Town and Iceland and even Amsterdam here. So I'm going to go in. We've got some unique audio for this. We've got clearance to use a particular music clip here. I'm going to go ahead and create my edit sequence. And I'll just go ahead and use this as a preset for now. We're cutting in 23976 for today. And from the audio project, I'm just going to lay down that music track on A1. There we go. And then from here, I can start to pick and choose exactly what I want to use from my different dailies projects here. So I know Marjorie's working on the Cape Town project here. Let me know when that's ready. Back here, I'll go ahead and open up the Cape Town project. Oh, there we go. Oh,
Yeah,
it
you
looks
can
like,
go ahead and refresh.
all right, so this is the project that Marjorie currently has open. You'll notice that the little lock file here is locked. It says Marjorie's got it open. She's making the changes inside of it. Now, this is something I wanted to show this because, Sean, you had this question regarding manually saving a project. So when I open up a project, I have the current state of that project. I'm looking at the current state of the project. But let's say I'm cutting away on my sequence for a while, and I need to, I can go ahead and open up an assistant editor's project, have it open on my screen, but I want to see the latest changes that the assistant is doing to the project. The way this works is from the project tab, I can, if I want to see the latest and greatest state, you'll notice that next to Marjorie's name here, so the project tab has the name of the project. It's got the editor who has it open listed. It's got a lock showing that it's a locked project. Then right now it also has this little yellow exclamation point here. That yellow exclamation point indicates that this project is, I'm looking at a stale copy. I'm not seeing the latest information for it. I need to refresh in order to see the latest information. So I don't have to close the project and reopen it to see that. All I need to do is hit refresh project, and it will show me the latest and greatest version of that. So now I'm looking at the latest version of this. Now from here, I might want to take advantage of a feature of Premiere, something we call pancaking, which is where I can have clips up in the up in my source, or I can have different timelines open simultaneously, and I can just drag and drop from one to the other to bring clips in. There, we've added that clip into my intro. Again, nothing else gets added to my intro project because I'm referencing the clips inside of the Cape Town project. In fact, if I wanted to see this clip in the Cape Town project again, I can right-click on it and choose Reveal in Project, and it will highlight it there for me. So if I prefer to load it in the source monitor, I could do that. Premiere is also flexible. If you haven't worked with or used Premiere in a while, Premiere is also flexible in that I can actually take Marjorie's string out and choose to load that in the source monitor, and then pancake the source monitor. So now you'll see I have a playhead here for the source monitor, and I have a playhead for my edit sequence. So at this point, I could actually, instead of having to go in and drag and drop individual clips, if you prefer, I could mark an in point, mark an out point, choose which. I only want the video, I don't need any of the audio. And I could do an overwrite or an insert edit, do an overwrite. And it's just added those clips in there for me. Oh, those are good shots, Marjorie, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and.
I also marked one of the clips a different color for you, if you want to show them like what it looks like for the project updating the
Perfect.
indicator.
Okay, so if I go back to, here's Marjorie's project. And again, here's her string out. He's made a change to this. Again, I'll just hit refresh project. And that's something you can actually have in your You can have it in the in your keyboard shortcuts if necessary. And so again, here's that key. We now can see one of the clips has actually changed color, I believe. Is that
Yeah.
what you were working on? Okay, awesome. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up the Iceland project here. And oh, I see. There's the clip that you've just updated in the Iceland project. It's a yellow clip and it's got a marker already on it, so that's something that you've added. Now that particular clip, Marjorie, if you can go ahead and throw a LUT on it for me. I know that right now we're kind of looking at that washed out footage. A lot of workflows, people do burn in the color information so that editorial doesn't have to deal with it, but Premiere is actually powerful enough that you can put LUTs or use the lumetri effect on every clip in a sequence. We have had feature films that have used sort of a live color workflow inside of Premiere as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that near the end. Looks like you've got some changes there. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the project. Ooh, nice. So this is an important thing here. You'll notice that this particular string out, this particular clip, and I'll go ahead and reveal that in the project. Marjorie is using this. She's using something called a master clip effect inside of Premiere. What this means, if I go ahead and load this clip into the source monitor, you'll see that that LUT information is actually being applied to the clip here in the source monitor. That's because the color information, the effect that's being used on that clip, it's actually on the clip in the bin. This is something called a master clip effect. It's nothing new in Premiere. It's something Premiere has been able to use for quite a while. And I can see here is that lumetri effect that's been applied to that particular clip. Now, if I take this clip, and I'll just use the copy and paste method here, trying to show you there's many different ways to work inside of Premiere. I'm going to make a copy of this into my timeline here. We'll put it right there. Yep. Not put the audio in. There we go. We'll drop it down a level. You can see that that color effect actually propagates and travels with the clip. This is all based on the clip in this project. If Marjorie were to go back and make a change to this clip, change it to a different LUT, as soon as I refresh that project, I will see all the LUTs update within that project. So it's possible that while one person is doing the edit with just the flat footage, you could have another person going in and using the built-in tools inside of Premiere to add color, to add LUTs, looks, different types of grading effects using our lumetri panel within Premiere. And as soon as you open up the project, it'll actually modify or change my sequence. I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I'll refresh this project. And the LUT has changed there. And it's also changed on my sequence. I like that better. That looks really good. So another way I can also tell that a project needs refreshing, if you'll notice this Cape Town project actually has italic letters here. That's another indication in the software that this needs to be refreshed. And again, I can just right click on it and say refresh, and it'll make sure and get the latest copy of this for me, so that I can see exactly any changes that Marjorie might be managing under the hood. So you'll see we both are working in this production at the same time. There's a list of who is actively working in this production. You can have many different editors working in a production. If you have a team of 5 editors who all want to work together, that's perfectly fine. As many editors as necessary. Let's see here. A couple more questions have come in. Jeffrey, great question, Jeffrey. Can I move the single project that I have already worked on into a new production, or do I have to start with a production? It's always a good idea to start with a production if you can. But if you have a single project and you want to import that in and then begin to kind of break it apart, you can do that. Basically, the way to do this is in any of the folders. Let's just I'll choose episode 103 as an example here. If I right click on this, you'll see that there's a menu choice here called Add Project to Production. So this lets you take any existing standalone Premiere Pro project and convert it into and add it to your production. When you do this, this will actually make a copy of the project. It doesn't modify or change the original project. It makes a copy and moves that copy into the production folder. So this is a very useful technique if you have an existing project that you want to convert into a production. Create your production, import the project, and then with that project open, you can start to drag and move elements out of the old project and into smaller new projects in the production. I hope that makes sense. Couple of other questions that have come through here. Let's see, if clips, Robin, it's been forever. I hope you're doing well. What are best practices to handle the cache across the productions workflow? It's a very good question. So Premiere Pro actually has a something called the media cache. The media cache is something that creates, there are helper files that get created inside this, and you can see the location of that by going to Premiere Pro, Preferences, Media Cache. Typically, what we recommend in this case is, particularly if people are working remotely, it's a good idea to keep the cache on a fast local drive. For example, if you have a fast SSD drive connected locally to your machine, that's going to give you best possible performance. The cache typically doesn't have any media inside of it. It is actually what we call helper files. This means there could be thousands and thousands of these very small files that help Premiere in scrubbing clips. They help with playback. Premiere will draw the audio waveforms and store those in the cache. So in most best practices, it's good to keep that local on the machine and just on a fast drive, because Premiere accesses those clips whenever you open a project. Premiere goes looking for the helper files for the media inside of that project. If there are some solutions, if you are looking for something at a facility and you're thinking about building a new facility around some type of shared storage, some of our shared storage partners, companies like OpenDrives, SNS, LumaForge, they have actually added some technology inside of their shared storage solutions that do allow you to share a cache if necessary. I would contact them. Setting it up is one of those things that for most people we do recommend keeping it local on the local machine, but there are some exceptions to that, and we can talk about that probably closer to the end. Let's see. Good questions coming in here. If clips are renamed in the Cape Town project, will it reflect in your intro project? Good question. The short answer for now is no. If I rename a clip in this project, or if Marjorie renames a clip in this project, the names on the timelines are actually going to be independent of each other. There used to be a checkbox inside of Premiere. It actually still is if you're working on a single project, that lets you link the timeline and the media projects together so that the names stay linked together. We actually, based on customer feedback in the beta, we ran into some real questions about whether that's the right way to go with a production. Most people felt that if you rename it in the timeline, how do you push that back to a project if you don't have that project open, or if that project is locked by somebody else? the best thing to do is to go into the Cape Town project and rename it there. Is kind of the best answer to that. Let's see here. Is the folder structure organization of this production fixed for everyone across the board? Can each editor structure things as they like it? It is fixed for everybody, because the important thing to note is any production that you have on the Finder level or on the Windows Explorer level, if you go and look at this on the operating system level, it is actually a folder that you can open in a standard window and a standard Finder window and look at it on the Finder level. So if I reveal this production that Marjorie and I are working on, it is in the Adobe Drive, Karl Media. Here it is, Around the World Episodic. And if you look at this, I have a seasons folder inside the production. I have a seasons folder inside of this folder here. Inside here, I have season 1, 2, and 3. If I open that up, I've got episode 101. If I open up dailies, you can see here we've got the audio project, we've got the Cape Town project, the Iceland project, and so on. It matches one-to-one with what we have inside the production folder. So the key thing here is, it's perfectly fine to have different editors organize things in different ways. If you wanted to start off by creating a folder with each editor's name on it and let them kind of decide how they want to organize things within that, perfectly valid way of working, and I've seen that before. A lot of questions on productions tonight. That's great. Glad to see here. Benjamin, good question here. Can productions work in an environment with both Mac and Windows workstations? They can. In fact, I do have a customer that's actually doing that right now, where the assistant is on a Windows machine and the lead editor is on a Mac. The key thing to note there is the first time that media is opened on a new machine, you may have to relink it the first time. There is a fundamental difference in the way paths are stored between Mac and Windows. So in most cases, Windows is going to be associated with a drive letter. The Mac is going to be associated with a volume name. Now, Premiere will store that path information. It'll store both paths for each of your clips, but it needs to know that first. So whenever a project is created and there's new media attached to it, if you create it on the Mac, when the Windows user opens it for the first time, it's going to show the media is offline and ask you to relink it. Once you do that one time, it will remember the Windows path and the Mac path. So at that point, either editor can open the project and it will work fine. That makes sense? Okay. All right. A lot of additional stuff I want to cover tonight. I want to make sure we get to it. A couple of gotchas to be aware of just in feature film production. And oh, by the way, if Marjorie, if you need to go, I just want to thank you for jumping in and helping tonight. Really appreciate it. But feel free to stick around if you want to hear the rest of this.
Totally. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Karl.
All right. One area that we have run into with certain people is dealing with speed changes and speed ramps and making different changes on clips. There are a couple of different methods of dealing with speed changes, and I just very quickly wanted to kind of talk about this and cover this a little bit. What I'm referring to is it's not uncommon these days to shoot footage in a high frame rate. Let's say if my film is being edited at 24 frames per second, it's not uncommon to see people shoot at 48 frames per second or 96 frames per second. They want to play that back at 24, and they want to get a smooth slow motion experience. But many times that high frame rate footage, you still need to play it back at high frame rate because you want to sync audio with it. The trick to doing this, the thing to remember, if you're ever having to deal with, off frame or off speed clips, overcranked footage, the key thing to remember is to use this value. I need to open up, I think Marjorie may have left, but she's also left some of these projects locked for me. Okay, I'm going to open up one that I have access to here. And there, okay. This will work. This actually is pretty appropriate to what we're working on. So if I right click on this clip, and you can do this in a group, you can bulk change this value. The key value to use is this value here called speed duration. So this is something that you can select multiple clips in the bin, change the speed duration, and what value you will change this to depends on what the frame rate of the footage is. By doing this, by using this speed duration effect, which is kind of a master clip effect, it preserves your timecode information. Now, this is crucial if I'm editing dailies, because we always want to make sure we can match back to the original high-res footage at the end of this process. I have seen some challenges. People have gone in and actually right-clicked on clips. There's a different way of doing this that's bad. Don't do this. I'll show it to you in case you know about this. Modify interpret footage. It is possible to change the frame rate here. If you do this, the timecode information will be off. So don't do it. You can achieve the exact same result, the exact same look by doing this in the bin by using speed duration. And speed duration will preserve the timecode information. Very, very important thing to note. The next thing I also want to cover really quickly has to do with dailies workflows. And I wanted to make sure and jump in and showcase kind of a start to finish workflow. If I am given a set of files from a digital imaging technician, if I need to synchronize my picture and sound and do all of this work in Premiere, there are different ways of doing it. And the way you do it can make a difference in how effective your turnovers are going to be at the end of the process. So I'm going to go ahead with this dailies folder selected here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. And we'll call this import. Well, I'll call it day 5, so we know it's different here. So here I have my day 5 project. Now let me take a moment just to talk about metadata. When you are working in a dailies environment, oftentimes you'll have additional information that can be presented to you. It might be log notes, it might be squeaky chair in this shot, or scene and take information. You'll notice that all the clips I've been working with so far, they have basically the same names as they were shot on the camera. I've got this A022C73, so on and so forth. Maybe I just want to see scene and take information in the file names. There is a way of actually organizing that, and we actually use a special format file. It's a text file. It's a human readable text file called a .ale file. Alpha Lima Echo, .ale. This file format is, it's an industry standard. It was pioneered by Avid many, many years ago. It's compatible with Premiere, and many times if you are working with a digital imaging technician, they are already creating ALE files. So Premiere can actually read these. So instead of importing a bunch of clips, I'm going to start by importing an ALE file. Let's see, I've got this locally here on my documents folder. And here we go. So here I have an ALE file. Again, this is just, it's a text file. It's a tab delimited text file. It can be opened up in any spreadsheet application like Excel, It can be opened up in, any type of text editor. So I'm going to open it up in Premiere. We'll just hit import. And when I do that, you'll see that Premiere actually brings in a series of offline clips. Now I'm going to go ahead and link these clips. Now the key thing here is you'll notice that these clips have a different name. This is the name of the clips on disk. This is the name of what I want to actually edit with. So I can see greatness take 1A, greatness take 2A, greatness take 3A, and so forth. So I can go ahead and locate these. And I'm just going to quickly on my other monitor connect these up. There we go. And just like that, instead of having to go through and type in different names on each of these individual clips, I now have the names that I actually want to work with. Now, under the hood, these clips are obviously, they're linked to, the media still on disk still has that same clip name that it did before. But now I get to look at something pretty instead of looking at just what are effectively random numbers and letters in many cases. So working with an ALE file, if you haven't checked it out before, definitely do some research. ALE actually stands for Avid Log Exchange, but it is a format that many applications actually can read and write today. So definitely a good way to go if your dailies are being created by somebody in another application. And there are dozens of different programs out there. I work with one film that I worked with. There's a dailies a production house here in Los Angeles known as Photochem, and Photochem actually has their own software for generating dailies. So many different applications can create dailies. In many cases, they can add color information in addition to all this rich metadata information. Now, one additional thing of note, the other great thing about an ALE file is if there's missing information in the ALE file, maybe some clips didn't get named correctly, maybe a producer has additional notes, they can actually open a copy of the ALE file in an Excel spreadsheet and add that information into the log column. In Premiere, if I'm already editing away with these clips, I can just select all the clips and choose Clip, Update Metadata. The metadata will come in. It will pull any new metadata from that updated ALE file. So another great way of working. Metadata is so crucial to the overall workflow process. And also know that there's many additional columns inside of the ALE file that we can also start to reveal by going into this metadata display window. And this includes information that, if you've shot this on feature film and the film has been scanned in by somebody, if you're still working with 35 millimeter film, making sure that the key code information comes across as metadata with the dailies. Again, crucial to being able to cut the negative at the end of the process. There's CDL values, LUT values that are in here. And again, if you're working with an ALE file, all that information can be passed across as metadata columns here within Premiere. Now, syncing audio and picture. There are many ways to do it in Premiere Pro. There is one method that I recommend if you need to hand the audio off to a sound engineer, and that is using multicams. You may see some stuff online about things like use something called merged clips. The problem with merged clips is it does not preserve the metadata to be able to link back to the original sound rolls. This can create a problem for the sound editor. If they're using a different application, a non-Adobe application such as Pro Tools, we see a lot of people using a Premiere to Pro Tools workflow. That using merged clips can create a bit of a problem. The other thing about merged clips is you have to do them one at a time. If I have 80 shots have come in today, I do not want to have to do 80 merged clips. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's time consuming. I'm just going to take my whole selection here of footage, and I've got different shots. I've got 9 takes of this greatness. I've got, looks like, I think this is closer to about 7 takes of Dreamers. I'm just going to select all of these and say create multi-camera source sequence. A couple of key settings that I'm going to use here. I'm going to use timecode. Premiere can use an alternate sound timecode if that's available in the metadata. The picture clips have to have some metadata information in them to let us know how to synchronize the two together. What is the offset between sound and picture as far as timecode is concerned? These are some crucial settings down here. I'm going to make sure that my sequence setting is set to camera 1 audio. These are just picture clips. They have no audio. So if by setting this to camera 1, it's going to use the WAV files and just the WAV files for my audio. And I also want to break these out as mono because this was shot as 4-channel or 5-channel mono. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And in one step, this goes through and creates all the multicams for me. Now you may be looking at the screen and thinking, oh, Karl did something wrong here. We have audio synchronization failure. What happened here? I'm going to click OK on that, but let's look at what Premiere did here. It created all of these multicams successfully, but there were some B-roll clips that didn't fit into any of the other clips. They had different time code. So yeah, these are the clips that didn't synchronize, but looking at the names of them, because I have descriptive file names from the ALE file, I can immediately say, oh yeah, these wouldn't synchronize because they were shot at off times and they don't have any matching timecode information from anything else. Now, each of these multicams is effectively done. I can load it into my source monitor. I can load it onto a timeline. I can cut with these. Trying to see where my picture actually, there it is. Okay. I think that's just a slowdown on my machine here. So I've got the different picture clips. I can double check my sync with this and just make sure that the clips are synchronized properly. But basically, I've got all the multicams I need. And if you're not aware of it, we did add a toggle button in the source monitor as well as the program monitor, so that if I just want to look at my active camera, I can just cut as if this is just a normal clip. But if I want to switch it out to the other camera angle, I can just click this button here. All right.
Karl, Chetan
yes.
Here.
Hi, Chetan.
We'll be starting a small poll regarding this session and all, along with this. So I thought just I will inform you on that.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, if you see on the poll tab, definitely we'd like to just, start to see, you fill out the polls as we're getting close to the end of this. I'm just going to quickly run through some questions here. Robin asking, does the audio IXML metadata carry over to Pro Tools? Yes. Yes, it does. You can thank, there's a gentleman on our team, Todd Reeder, that actually worked to make sure that this was something that works. Premiere doesn't have a way of showing the IXML data in an easy-to-read format. It's not something that we automatically do tracking based on the names because the clips and the tracks are independent of each other. But the information is actually in there, and it will pass across as valid metadata over into Pro Tools. Can you merge the ALE into media that's already in a project that wasn't imported via ALE? No. And that's the key thing. You want to start with the ALE file. There's no easy way of merging that metadata back into clips if you've already imported the clips. Premiere doesn't know what you would want from the ALE versus what you already have in the clip, and if you've added some information manually, there's be a whole synchronization process, and we'd have to know, if you've added the scene and take information manually, do you want us to overwrite that? And it can get complicated. Bring in the ALE first. You have no problems, and you can always update the metadata after the fact. So really good question. And can you export an ALE out from Premiere? Absolutely. Chetan, if you can just answer me the question here, do we have a hard stop at 30 past the hour? Or can we continue on a little bit? I may be running a little bit long.
Yeah, we can go on for 5-10 more minutes.
Okay. All right, good. I'll keep it relatively close to that. Another thing I just quickly wanted to point to about the multicams that are crucial here. You'll notice that when I double click on one of these clips and I start to play this clip back, you'll actually see that this was shot with 5 different microphones, and each of those microphones is showing up independently down here. If I go to try and cut this in to my timeline, it's not going to, every single time I want to cut with this, I'm going to have to turn off these A1 through A5 indicators here in my sequence. If I just wanted to cut with A1, for example, I would literally, every time I would have to turn off A2, I'd have to turn off A3, and so on. If I'm in a situation where I know that I just want to cut with the boom mic, there's actually a very easy way of doing that. And again, you can do it as a batch selection. So I'll take all of these greatness shots, right click on these, and I'll choose modify audio channels. And this little matrix shows that I've got 5 mono tracks, and each of those are tracks 1 through 5 in my sequence. I'm going to change this to 1 track, and then I can pick and choose where is the boom mic. If the boom mic is on A5, I can select A5 here. If it's on A1, I can select A1 here. And now, if I load any of these into my source monitor, you'll see that my audio meter is just a single track. And when it comes time to cut this in anywhere from my source monitor, it's only going to need to cut in a single track of audio. It's not going to cut in all 5 tracks of audio. So the great thing about that is those other tracks are in there. Any clip in my timeline, any multicam that has multiple channels of audio, I can always right click on it and go to this audio channels option in the pop-up menu here, the right click menu. So if I want to change that after the fact, I can definitely do that. Or if I want to add additional audio microphones back into my edit, I can absolutely do that. Okay. I'm almost out of time. We had so many great questions on productions that I'm gonna have to go fairly quickly when it comes to turnovers and deliverables. All of your exports, when it comes time to export out your files, you can do that very, very easily. In fact, let me go ahead. I'm going to close this production. And we'll go back to my other production, which is conveniently in this little drop-down list here. And I'll go ahead and go to my edits in progress here, and we'll just pull up my cut. When it's time to export out, when it's time to actually start doing things like turnovers, once you have a sequence ready to go out, simply select it and choose File, Export, and choose the format that you need to go out to. For Pro Tools users, AAF is the preferred workflow. OMF is still in the list. You're welcome to try using it. We actually, all the guidance in the industry is to move to AAF. OMF is no longer being developed. It's no longer getting fixed. That's not just by Adobe, but that's by Avid. We ask about this and they say, don't use OMF, use AAF. It's the better way to go. Couple key things here. If you want to prep your sequence ahead of time, if you have a mix of mono and stereo information in your sequence, it's a good idea to put the mono information on mono tracks. Most editors prefer to work with what we call standard tracks, where you can just drop any audio, mono or stereo, onto that track. And that's perfectly fine for editing. But when it comes time for turnovers, you can clean up and save the Pro Tools editors a lot of headache if you do sort of a prep. You prep your timeline. Name your tracks. Put sound effects, music, and dialogue on separate tracks. If you have mono sound effects and stereo sound effects, separate them out. Put them on separate tracks. You can copy your edit into a new sequence very easily in Premiere. There's no reason not to do a little bit of housekeeping before you hand it off. It's kind of like cleaning up your document before you turn it into the teacher. As far as the AAF settings are concerned, this breakout to mono option is something you will have to do. To get the best fidelity and to keep all the metadata information, doing a breakout to mono is the best way of doing it. The key thing about creating the AAF file is if you used multicam, Premiere will automatically flatten those multicams when you export the AAF file. So in other words, all of your source clips are what actually get cut into your timeline. You don't have to worry about having to go through and do any type of flattening because you're using multicams. If you use nested clips, there is no option for flattening. And so the Pro Tools artist gets a bunch of clips that say, oh, here's this clip that's called merged from Premiere. I don't know what media to use on disk for it. So that's a challenge. That's why we highly, highly recommend anytime you think you're going to be turning over to an audio engineer at the end of the process, use multicam. Do not use merge clips. EDLs are also an option. We see a lot of people doing EDLs to go to applications such as Basslight. Still a valid format. This is something you need to check with your, check the workflow, check the pipeline, make sure that the EDL coming out of Premiere has the fidelity that the other application needs. Every application is slightly different. There are all these different checkboxes in here. You want to find the correct mix of checkboxes that works for that vendor. Really the best way to do it is just to send them a sample and ask if it works. And lastly, XML is the other common turnover format. Premiere supports Final Cut Pro XML. This is the Final Cut 7 XML. It's the original Apple XML version 7 format. It's not FCPX, it is FCP 7 based. That XML format is still a strong industry standard when it comes to turnover-based workflows. And the great part about it is it probably has the best timeline fidelity out of any of the interchange formats. The key thing to note here is select your sequence. Do not select your project because the XML format can actually contain both. And many applications just want a sequence. They don't want the entire project XML. They choke on it. So make sure and just select the sequence and not the project tab when you do your export. Okay, the last quick thing that I quickly want to talk about, if you have separated out your sound and you have music and sound effects and dialogue all conveniently exported and ready and labeled, and I'll just quickly expand these tracks so that you can see I actually do have voiceover, music, sound effects. If you need to do a split delivery, the way Premiere works, anytime you're working inside of audio, there's this concept of what we call a master track. The key thing to be aware of, any timeline that you're working with, Typically, it's mixing everything in the timeline down into this master track. And if the master track is set for stereo, you can only output this timeline as 2-channel stereo. However, it's possible to create a new sequence and set that new sequence up with something called a multi-channel master track. And I can set the multi-channel master to have up to 32 output tracks. So if you're trying to deliver a single QuickTime that has, 2-channel Mandarin, 5.1 English, 5.1 Thai, stereo Bahasa Malay, you can actually do that. You can have that single file and do that. The key thing to note here is you need to tell Premiere where each of the outputs is actually going. I have a whole tutorial that talks about this in more detail. I can definitely send Chetan the link to share with everybody. The key thing to be aware of is your audio track mixer is actually going to be your friend. This is a panel. If you're setting this up for the first time, it's a good idea to open this up, take a look at this, and make sure that you have, like, the voiceover is going to the correct output tracks, the sound effects, the ambience, and so on. Make sure everything is separated out and it's all routed or assigned to the correct tracks. If you create that multi-channel master track, I'll do that one more time here, and I will wrap up here. I apologize, I'm running a little bit long tonight. We'll set this to 24 tracks, just as an example. You'll notice that the audio track mixer actually has this little assignment list so that I can see that this is all routed to 1 and 2 to start with. But if I wanted this track to go out to 13 and 14, I can check that box here and I can set that up. Once you set this up, it's a preset. It's very easy to use once you have it as a sequence preset. You just create that sequence preset for a split channel delivery. You take your edit, copy it over into that, double check and make sure everything is in the correct tracks and it's all going to be routed appropriately. And then you can choose to export this with the same number of tracks that you created in your sequence. Okay, we've covered a lot tonight. Very, very quickly, I just want to look and check. Looks like one more question here. Robin asking about when doing turnover to Pro Tools and retaining the audio metadata, AAF. Don't use OMF. OMF will preserve some of the metadata, but it's just we don't have a lot of what's inside of it. We don't have a lot of ability to fix it. OMF's got some real limitations on what is actually available inside of it. The files have to be under 2 gigs in size, so there's definitely some issues there. What's the best way to clean up standard audio tracks? In other words, to break stereo clip into a single standard audio track out to 2 mono tracks. So here's the good news. You don't have to deal anything that is stereo in your timeline, just leave it on a standard track. The AAF file will automatically break that apart into a left channel and a right channel. Nothing necessary there. It's the mono effects on a standard track that you need to be concerned with. If a mono sound effect is on a standard track, when that goes into Pro Tools, it will create a duplicate. It will create a mono sound effect left and a mono sound effect right channel. There'll be separate tracks. So to avoid that, you do want to make your timeline, if you're working with mono sound effects, make mono tracks for those sound effects, and those will come in as single channel, single tracks in the output. That's the key there, Benjamin. Guys, I hope this has been helpful for everybody. Thank you, guys.